Welcome to Gold Line Press and Ricochet Edition's first event as part of our 2x2 reading series. We're so excited to kick off this reading series with Queer Aesthetics, Looking Forward, which features our hosts Muriel Guzman and readers Kazim Ali, Angie Sijun Lou, Alejandro Heredia, and Stephen Van Dyck. As some of you may already know, Gold Line and Ricochet are sibling presses with different aesthetic traditions, yet our identities as presses have transformed greatly over the years with new graduate students at USC's PhD in Creative Writing and Literature program fulfilling editor roles at both presses every year. The 2x2 reading series is our way of blending our presses' evolving identities together to celebrate the spectacular authors we've had the great fortune of publishing over the years and to introduce our audiences to our ever-evolving catalogs.
I would like to introduce all of us at Goldline and Ricochet, starting with the Ricochet team, Ricochet editors. Can you raise your hand or make some other cute gesture when I introduce you so we know who you are by face? We have Laura Roque, who's in charge of our distribution. Thomas Brangilian, who is our editorial editor. Matt Kessler, who is our publicity editor. And I'm Tisha Reichley Aguilera, the managing editor for Ricochet Editions.
And next at Goldline, we have Marcus Clayton, our nonfiction editor. Sarah Featheroff, our poetry editor. And Jocelyn Tacox, our fiction editor. And I'm Muriel Leung, the editor-in-chief of Goldline Press. The first reading of our 2x2 series is something that we're exceptionally ecstatic about as we're nearing the end of Pride Month while in the thick of protests for Black lives. We at Goldline and Ricochet believe that pride and advocating for the dignity and respect of Black lives are not mutually exclusive, and that we as editors and artists have a responsibility to respond to what transpires in the world, to take responsibility for the harms we cause and our abilities to change the course of systemic violence. We put together this reading in acknowledgement that pride emerged from protests led by Black trans women, and that the rights of so many members of our LGBTQ communities were gained from the risks they took. And so while we're holding this reading during a time of deep social and political grief, we should also acknowledge the strength of this history and feel invigorated to fight alongside our communities who are Black, trans, disabled, poor, and insist on our deep attention. In the midst of all of this, we're so glad to have you all here with us, our hosts, our readers, and those in the audience at home. We're in the middle of a pandemic, yes, but our belief in the arts and its political transformative value, that remains a very, very bright flame. A couple of accessibility notes before we begin. There's going to be 3 to 4 of us who'll be live captioning the event, so please refer to the closed captioning button on your Zoom screen for subtitles. You can click Show Subtitles and view full transcript to follow along. And we also plan to upload the video to YouTube after with subtitles, so you can view this reading again at home and share with everyone. After the reading, we're going to have a Q&A facilitated by our host, Roy Guzman, and time for the audience to ask questions. So please use the Q&A feature on Zoom webinar at that point to ask your questions. And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our host, Roy Guzman, for this event. We're so excited to have Roy for this event as their literary activism has notably shaped and contributed so much to the landscape of poetry for queer and trans writers of color. Roy G. Guzman is a 2019 NEA grant recipient and a 2017 Ruth Lilly and Dorothy Sargent Rosenberg Poetry Fellow. Their debut poetry collection, Cachachos, will come out on Grey Wolf later this year. Welcome, Roy.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Muriel, and thank you so much, everyone, for joining us, our readers. Before we get to the reading tonight, I would just like to introduce one of our sponsors, the One Archives at the USC Libraries. The One Archives at the USC Libraries is the largest repository of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer materials in the world, comprising over 2 million archival items. The collections are primarily national in scope, with a special focus on the Los Angeles area. However, the archives also preserve a number of international books, periodicals, and posters. Founded in 1952, the collection includes a wide variety of materials, including manuscripts, personal papers, graphics, posters, textiles, films, audio recordings, books, periodicals, paintings, prints, and photographs. One Archives has been a part of the University of Southern California Library since 2010. All right, so let's make this super gay and super trans. So the theme of tonight's reading and conversation is queer aesthetics, a concept that has, as Muriel pointed out, focused on a global range of queer and trans artistic expressions. The term originated in the 1980s and accounted for politics surrounding identity and gender. Originally preoccupied with the AIDS crisis and feminism, queer aesthetics has become an umbrella term for countless expressions by queer and trans artists. Tonight's readers will read material that contends with the questions, for instance, what are the limitations for queer literature's focus on identity politics, and what possibilities exist for expanding beyond these bounds to address some of the most urgent issues brought about by late-stage capitalism. Queer aesthetics can also be expressed in the form of an uprising. Tonight's event is extra special because it takes place on the 51st anniversary of the Stonewall Uprising, or Stonewall Riots in New York City. Let me introduce tonight's first reader. In that vein, Alejandro Heredia. Alejandro Heredia is a 2019 DreamYard Radical Poetry Consortium Fellow and winner of the Golden Lion Press 2019 Fiction Chapbook Contest, selected by Miriam Gurba, another badass. His work has been featured in Auburn Avenue Magazine, La Galeria Magazine, and No Dear Magazine, amongst others. His chapbook, titled You're the Only Friend I Need, a brief collection of stories about immigration, queerness, and friendship, is forthcoming in March 2021. So let's welcome Alejandro.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to read today. I'm going to be reading from a short story titled You're the Only Friend I Need. I'm going to try to get through 3 pages. We'll see if I get through it. All right, cool. Just for some context, the story starts with 2 teenagers who are hanging out in a cafe. They're waiting for another friend. See. Oh. Where did you meet this guy anyway? I told you, Loca, friend of a friend. You know how that goes. Everybody has a gay cousin, Fabio says. Noel likes the sound of that, Loca. They've been doing this new thing where they refer to each other by feminine pronouns, and it feels good. Simple, like seeing each other better. Finally, he comes through the door. Fabio, verdad? Ren, he says. He has the eyes of a fox, playful, seeking. Brent takes the boys in, their uniforms, their smooth faces round with youth. Noel notices that both of Ren's ears are pierced. Most of the men he knows only have one pierced, and certainly never the gay ear, though which ear marks one as a homosexual, Noel always forgets. They talk until the cafe closes at 9. Ren tells them where he went to school, the odd jobs he does now to get by. They circle around the topic but never enter into it, past that hidden door. Noel looks around to see if anyone will notice, perhaps the old couple sitting by the door, or the owner, who doesn't stop to come out from behind the counters, ask them what they'd like. They must see it in Brent at least. Fabio is unapologetic about his femininity, will throw it in anyone's face, but only when he is confident he is safe. Often, as he does now, he comports himself to his environment. If he is around new people or in a public space where shame or slurs might follow him. For Ren, there seems to be little performance. He exudes feminine energy out of some unfathomable core at his center. A soft, swooshing flirtation, like a curtain dances to a summer breeze. How he wipes sweat from his forehead with an open palm. The way he puckers his lips, just so, to accentuate a joke, or his smile, which is childlike, matched with his feline eyes, which denote a hint of wisdom, as if he has access to some hidden truth. He even crosses one leg over another, the way men shouldn't, the way these boys have been instructed not to do their whole lives. Noel wonders if this is their future, if they will look and speak and move like Ren one day, if they too can build themselves a core like this. The thought of it is as exciting as it is frightening. Noel can't tell which feeling dominates the other. Outside, a moonless night covers the city. Okay, chicos, Ren says, and they follow him down Calle El Conde. They turn to a dark alleyway, away from the light. Ren says he will go first, tells them to keep watch for the stray drunk or militant officer doing his rounds. He goes into the shadow with his bag slung over his back. When he returns, he is a new person. Noah looks at him with his mouth agape. Wow, Fabio says. Ren wears a long, wavy black wig that falls to the middle of his back. A loose maroon dress hangs off his shoulder, open chest, revealing a tattoo of a rose right below his left collarbone. He continues the rest of his transformation before them in the soft orange street light. 2 small hoops replaced by large silver earrings, worn down sneakers replaced by tall strap heels. His makeup takes the most time. He looks at himself in a small, compact mirror to powder his forehead. Finally, when his eyeliner is done, he pulls out a tube of red lipstick. The boys stare at Ren as Ren paints a line across each mound of flesh. He presses them together, then puckers his mouth to show off his soft red lips. This is what I spend all my fucking money on, he says. How do I look? Fabio's eyes are full and wide. He looks as if he's found a pearl after searching long and hopelessly in the dark. He nods, smiles, says nothing. He's too struck to speak. Next to him, Noel is unnerved. He feels as if he might laugh at the sight. A man turning into a woman right before his eyes. The part of him that is dictated by logic, that which has always been good at following the rules, that part of young Noel wants to laugh at the absurd. Then there is the other, or the others. The multitudes within him that fight to push their way to the front of conscious thought, like a field of fireflies flickering in synchrony, as if to point to this moment in time, as if to say, you have arrived. Can't be seen out here looking like a maricón, can't be seen in there looking like an ugly man. Que maldito lío, Ren says, rolls his eyes, but smiles at his reflection in the compact mirror. Fabio goes into the shadow next, comes out wearing his aunt's blue blouse, tight black jeans. His skinny arms stick out awkwardly, and the blouse is a little too big on him. He parts his small fro, and in it places a white flower. Oh, she's virginal, Ren says, and fixes the flower on Fabio's head. Then he takes a few pins from his bag, uses them to tighten the boy's blouse in the back. Now it looks as if the blouse was made for his body exactly, not to be filled with breasts and an older woman's heft. Ren puts an orange color on Fabio's lip and uses a hint of highlighter to accentuate his cheekbones. Noel comes out from the shadow of the alleyway, walks back into the cut of light from the street lamp. Fabio looks at him in disappointment. Noel has dressed up like the party goers he's seen in music videos, tight jean shorts, a white tank top, a shirt tied to his waist. What are you doing? I thought you were taking something from your grandmother, Fabio says. Do I look bad? I don't know. I wanted to look more cool than girly, you know? Ren jumps between them before Fabio can respond. You look cute as a boy. You look cute as a boy. It's okay. But we gotta get some paint on your face. You'll like it, I promise. I'm gonna skip a little bit here. Let's see. Not so long ago, there were boys playing baseball in the street. raging against some inner beast, or not resisting at all, taken over by its might, the wrath of boyhood, a scream, a belch, unabashed laughter, the soles of their naked feet slapping the concrete, the bloody knuckle crushed against another's cheekbone, a bruised lip, a cutting joke, a chorus of argument, and when alone or in couples, the sudden gentleness, protection when needed, showing up to a friend's fight just in case, the ever-present in front of the mirror, facing their naked bodies, skinny or fat or too small or too big or smooth or growing hair, each day something new, the fear of jumping, but jumping anyway, even if only to impress. They were everything, boys. Now look at them, girls, or adjacent to them, not quite girls, but not boys either. Girly boys, maybe, gliding through the streets of Santo Domingo, protected by the night, soft as feathers, quick as shadows, hiding, but filled with a gust of pride for everything they've made of themselves, what they've managed to take from the corner of the mind or a dream, a fantasy materialized. That's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Alejandro, for these characters and for these beautiful descriptions. I'm sure we're gonna have a chance to talk about this excerpt in the Q&A or even before that. Our next reader is Kazim Ali. Kazim Ali is an American poet, novelist, essayist, and professor. His most recent books are Inquisition out of Wesleyan University Press and All Once Blue out of India, HarperCollins, India. Please welcome Kazim Ali.
Hello, everybody. I'm just going to read several short poems. This is a poem called Recite. Small animal, recite. You sent nowhere, arriving in the night. All my forgotten prayers. Not prayers, really. Nothing to ask for. No one would answer. The crassness of calling a body a corpse. There's a lawnmower sound through the window. Someone is singing. Is this body a house? Is this house a body? God's like you, a misfit. You don't fit. He don't fit. This next poem is, it's after a poem by Lars Gustafsson, which is called The Stillness of the World Before Bach. That's his poem. I guess when he listened to Bach for the first time, he had that artistic response. So my poem is called The Stillness of the World Before Baudelaire in Bangla. I was at a translation conference in Silchar, which is a town in Assam in the northeast of India, where your tea might come from. And there was one of the translators there read Baudelaire in Bangla, and Baudelaire had never been particularly interesting to me. But he's great in Bangla. To be close enough to that must have been a world fallible as a saint. Your foot, free of its sandal, rests lightly on top of mine. To smell your skin for the flowers around my neck, to be allowed to fall. Outside in the street, a funeral procession groans on while you read, and the crows applaud your translation, Baudelaire into Bangla. My mouth tastes the air. Your tongue pronounces me, sounds out the insides. Your soul, a portal streaked in sweat, my infinity falters. If sound does cease, will this evaporate? Young men in orange, flowers on the body, we are listening. My new book of poems that's coming out from Alice James Books in the fall is comprised of a chain. The center of it is a chain of 40 sonnets. But sonnets may be more inspired by what Ted Berrigan or Harmony Holiday did with the sonnet as opposed to what you might ordinarily think. So I will just read you 2 of those maybe. Now do I always turn to the tenor stricken. I have no fear of God, but of being this archangel unfolding to emerge from God into form, how untoward, above and below the line of having lived, I abstain, bound to the horizon, not earth, not sky, not the earth of voice, singing, breaking. A body breaks, Stations of the Cross, or Jewish texts that blank out a single vowel in order to have a flaw. Unspeakable mind is not empty mind, but mind river flowing and knowing it flows. Let me get there, past years or drink or sex. When I saw the dog after a decade, he only wanted to look at me, lick me, smell me. So dog will just get right to the point. If you have a dog, you know they do not beat around the bush. Okay. No more will I listen to other than a single note moaned, not known. I do not hear, think again what place presents here a body as a battery of the one moment to open your mouth to plug in. I will allow what I invented to find its color, make a shape which neither water nor sky do. How do you now in this contained shape go through your life, not like a constellation, not guessed at, intuited, or divined? No name, so how do you discern a shape for what is often called God? And this sonnet, which is the last one of these that I'll read, refers to something called Vanta black. And Vanta black is a color, a deep dark black that cannot be apprehended by the eye. It was designed for surveillance purposes, but it's been leased to the artist Anish Kapoor to create art with. So this is the sonnet Vanta black. Vanta black was made for missiles or planes, for defense purposes so dark no eye could see it. Some voices are like that. No one could hear them. It is not good to be lost. To be lost is more than metaphor for spiritual condition. I sit at the terrace overlooking the green sea. Perhaps it is failure that ought to be sought. The voice that fails, falls silent, or the bodies. The blue failed me. The sun fails every evening. I, we, you have all failed too. Everyone who strove all these long years for peace failed. And I'm just going to close because it's time for me to close. But I would like to read a poem by the late and great Lucille Clifton, whose birthday just happened. And of course, since, I want to bring in at the voice of a Black writer, and as a non-white writer, the earliest other non-white writers I myself read were Black writers, including Lucille Clifton. And so this little poem, I loved it when I first read it, but it's very much been on my mind recently, and it's called After Kent State. Only to keep his little fear, he kills his cities and his trees, even his children. O people, white ways are the way of death. Come into the black and live. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that reading, Kazim. And I'd love to see how the sonnets look like on the page. Maybe that's something we can talk about later, but thank you for that wonderful reading. Our next reader is Stephen Van Dyke. Stephen is a Los Angeles, California, and Albuquerque, New Mexico based writer and artist. He is the author of People I've Met from the Internet, and an organizer of the Los Angeles Road Concerts. Please welcome Stephen.
Hi, everyone. This is my book, People I've Met from the Internet. And it is a list of everyone I met in person from the internet from 1998 to 2009. And it starts out with the list, and then it repeats annotated, and the annotations form a kind of novel. And I'm just gonna read right from the beginning. Kenneth had hairsprayed, crispy, spiked hair, light brown skin, and a navy blue polo in his junior yearbook photo. He was a senior at my high school when I was a freshman. Over the phone, he played his favorite song, Lost in Love by the Nasty Boy Click, an R&B track popular on hip-hop stations across the Southwest. Kenneth told me Fire It Up by Busta Rhymes sampled the Knight Rider theme song. Kenneth couldn't believe I had never heard of Knight Rider. 2 months later, my screen name was Fire It Up 6. This was during a period of using mostly Tori Amos-inspired titles for my gay screen names. Cruel 1983, Spark 926, Boy for Pele. This was a year before I got the poster of Tori nursing a piglet that my mother demanded I remove. For my straight friends, I was Vow 15 and later Vow 16, a gothy song by Garbage plus my age. My friend Jerry thought Shirley Manson was my type, and for a while that became my explanation. Standing defiantly still at the mic, Shirley Manson didn't smile or make an innocently seductive face. Shirley Manson had electric blue eyeshadow and black circles around her eyes. I wanted black circles around my eyes. Shirley Manson told the stupid girl in the song she was a phony for trying to be liked. She told me I was a phony too, for keeping my gay screen names secret, for trying to live in two worlds at once. Kenneth's parents never married, though they were a couple for at least as long as he had been alive. Did his parents celebrate anniversaries, eat dinner together, live together? Kenneth told me they did in an apartment complex near the Costco on Jefferson. I wondered if Kenneth played the Nasty Boy Click song to tell me he wanted to get lost in love with me. I didn't know if this was a thing people did. All I knew was my middle school friend Shannon Cook and I played songs back and forth over the phone, holding cordless receivers to our boom boxes to have a conversation. We once used most of an evening and Jagged Little Pill to communicate that she had a crush on me. Soon I had to buy a second Jagged Little Pill because my first was so scratched. Kenneth and I exchanged multi-page locker notes. At the top of my stack of brown paper bag wrapped textbooks, tiny folded packages appeared and I opened them to find, "Hey cutie," parenthesis, plus a full page of hard to read cursive and smeared pencil. My responses were full of questions because I missed whole paragraphs. In one note, Kenneth told me to find him in an outdoor patio area at our high school that I didn't know was there. It was just through the doors past the school cafeteria, a short walk from where I ate lunch every day with the Creative Writing Club girls on the cold tile floor. We described our lunch spot as behind the bear, a taxidermied black bear named Oso, who greeted students every morning at the school's entrance. After I read Kenneth's note, I went through the cafeteria doors and found metal picnic tables and a few scrawny trees enclosed by tall cinder block walls. Kenneth was there joke fighting with his friend Sean, who had a high-pitched voice with a Valley Girl rise. For the rest of the lunch hour, Kenneth ignored me. On the other side of the cinder block walls, a car once hit a skateboarding sophomore. The Creative Writing Club was in session when it happened. He landed 50 feet from where the car struck him and died. I only remember his last name, Cisneros. The school was surrounded by cookie-cutter housing developments, and I marveled at their identical compact floor plans, each with different sets of people and furniture. The only places I could recognize were along the drive to school from my house, the streets I drove with my mother every school day. Once she was crying, but she wouldn't say why. She could barely speak. Every morning, my mother woke me up by saying my name in the same slow voice she used when she was mad. In 1997, free software CDs in the mail accumulated on the kitchen counter. America Online, Prodigy, CompuServe. At Sam Goody, the cashier would let me take as many America Online CDs as I wanted. My first compact disc sighting, I was 10 and with friends in a cul-de-sac where we spent many summer afternoons. Standing on our bikes in a circle, we described to each other, though we could see it for ourselves, the jagged shards reflecting green and violet. Another time in that cul-de-sac, we played sidewalk Monopoly, using each square as real estate. My home that afternoon was the shaded area of a juniper tree and my friend's neighbor's gravel lawn. I remember putting the AOL disc in the CD drive for the first time. Its promise was all of America and free for the first 500 hours, which sounded to me like several lifetimes worth. Without a modem, I couldn't get past the sign-in box's teal and purple swirl background. Around this time, we moved because my mother wanted me to go to the nicer public high school. My father waited to go to the computer store until after the move. He didn't like the nearby mini mall small business computer store owner because he would fart in front of us. And I'm just gonna skip forward. So then he logs on and he has some girlfriends. One day, I found the America Online custom chat rooms, member-created spaces to supplement the AOL-themed rooms like Beanie Babies or Denver or basketball. The M for M chat rooms vastly outnumbered the other custom rooms and were organized by city and or fetish. Men were looking for men. Right away, I received a message from a boy my age in Italy wanting a long-term relationship. In his photo, he had abs, dark curly hair, tan skin, and a square jaw. He was shirtless, his mouth slightly ajar. I doubted it was of him, and it didn't matter. We talked all night, and I came. I sent other guys his photo and said it was me. They told me I was hot. There was an Albuquerque M for M room. I don't think I had any idea that there were so many gay men in the world, let alone in Albuquerque. Entering the room was the most eventful moment, as its chat members sat waiting for anyone new. I labored over my profile with the aim of casting a wide net while also being true to my personality and taste. I went through many AOL screen names. At 11 p.m., my mother would burst in and yank the phone cord from the wall in a dramatic show of force. Some nights I would sneak back to the computer room and plug the phone cord back in the wall, but only after, oh, am I done? But only, wait, real quick. But only after waiting until my parents had gone to sleep, listening to Eurythmics' Greatest Hits, my first album purchase at age 11. When I played Sweet Dreams to my parents, they said the music was fake because there were no actual instruments. One time my mother paused the song. Did she say some of them want to abuse you? Abuse? No, I said, amuse. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Stephen. Funny, poignant, too relatable. I'm sure we'll get to talk about that in a few. And I just want to introduce our last reader for tonight, Angie Sijun Lou. Angie is a poet and writer living in Los Angeles. Her work has appeared or is forthcoming in the American Poetry Review, Fence, Black Warrior Review, the Adroit Journal, the Asian American Literary Review, hyphen, The Margins, and others. Please welcome Angie.
Hi, thank you Goldline, Ricochet, Roy, and Muriel for making this possible. And especially Muriel, because Muriel made my chapbook into a presentable piece of art. It's coming out with Goldline Press later this year. It's called All We Ask Is You to Be Happy. So I'm going to read two poems. The first one is sort of a narrative poem, or maybe it's an elegy. I'm not sure. It's called Happiness, I, Thou, You, Me. The last words my uncle spoke formed a request for the breathing machine to be unplugged. I don't know the precise lexicon he used. I was not there. I was intraversibly far away, oceanically absent. Yuan Ge Chong Yang. It was the first day of a new year. I had gone on a long run to find the end of a long trail. It would take all day to go there, to come back. At the end of a long trail, a freeway, a rose bush. The brain has a dull awareness of its own flicker, like the dimples of a horse with no intention of loving you. That night, a lover cut my hair while I smoked. I lied to him and said a rose bush had pricked me. Many years ago, before I was a tiny ball of plasma, my father took a train into the desert to visit my uncle, who was imprisoned in a labor camp in Qingpu. 4 of my uncle's girlfriends were also aboard this train. Magnolias blossomed in the courtyard, their colors bled as the train lurched forth. Is the train a phallus or a crucifix? Slowly, over the course of the ride, the girls and my father discovered they were all visiting the same man. The girls each became enraged. They fought over who he loved the most, who he had seen last before he had gone, who he wrote to with the greatest frequency. They compared the dates on their letters. He had written to each of them on the same day. They counted the characters on their letters, all precisely the same length. A true communist is one who believes in unilateral longings, universal particulars over particular universals. One of them reached across the aisle and grabbed the hair of another, and she tore out a fistful of crumpled black. My father looked listlessly at his lap. The train did not stop. It barreled into the night like a fetus. Outside, the summer was only beginning to blossom. Summer at once, a field of violated water, or the violet energy of bruises. Girl A has a birthmark in the shape of a fist. Girl B sleeps with her fist in her mouth. The object of your hunger, the larval object, comes closer for inspection. Girl C looks at the oxen in the meadow, their strong muscles glinting in the muddy silt. Of course, the aura of you is you. You traverse ruins or monuments after their symbolism has dripped away. Girl A tears her letter to shreds, tucks the shreds inside her panties. Girl B gets off at the next station, waits 3 days until the next train home. And the obliqueness of seasons, how each rain is lit with the end of another. In Shanghai, Girl D bathes herself in tar, lays down under a flaccid sun, asks how far is a light year? How far is a light year? Girl E, there is no Girl E. I think about the tufts of hair which were pulled out, river weeds, the material trace, a longing for singularity, transports you beyond the realm of signification into happiness, I, thou, you, me. His last words meant death was a desire he had chosen, that dying was the lack. Then now here, dying all over the place. I believe in the power of small distances uncoiling into landscapes, lacunas which puncture and recurse us to an origin point, which is a vanishing point, which is a swan's heart beating inside of a Ziploc bag. Time, in its empty homogeneity, the succession of living things, dark, really dark, almost light. It has taken me 26 years to end this poem. Boredom is not a cause of death, but the NOA which fills the blackened seed. Okay, I'm gonna read one more short poem. It's a love poem, now that we're done with the death poem. It's called Love Poem number 4. I empty you out, or you empty me out, because I can put anything inside you. The premeditation of this act expands beyond itself into something vulgar, orbiting instead of synthesizing within a shipping container of loss. But forget meaning. You are a mnemonic device for truly nothing. Myself. Even the sun caught in the blue flame of my phone is too slippery to articulate. Ekphrastic angel wearing a hoodie with no shirt underneath, face down on the sidewalk outside my childhood home. Suddenly I understand autumn and its fissured light. I never intended to produce a symbolically hyped world order, though I admit to indulging in a history of projection, the ashes of which I scatter until it comes back as rubies gleaming in a mortar. I'm just a girl trying to resist consciousness, baby. I wear Jesus' chain around my neck, serpentine yet pure, an ambered skull, voice inside my skull, speaking as an oracle bone. Like every pale-toothed hound who has forgotten how to comb a forest, I've fallen immoderately in love with processed meat. Still, there is carnality and desire. And where am I to go with this longing, if not towards? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angie. I'm like busy taking all these like beautiful, jotting down all these like wonderful lines from your work. Thank you for that. Thank you so much to all 4 writers. I don't know if you want to help me. Amazing, amazing work tonight. Yeah, let's get into like the part of our discussion, conversation. Of course, feel free to use the Q&A feature to type any questions you might have for that section of tonight's event. I have a lot of questions, but obviously we don't have all the time in the world, but there's a lot of words and images, themes that are buzzing in my head tonight from all 4 readers. And one of the questions that I was thinking about in thinking about queer and transness, queer and trans aesthetics related to this question of tradition, the people that you are in conversation with. And I was thinking, with Alejandro, one thing that I found arresting is the use of the word loca, right? Like loqueria, loca resistance, right? That the loca is not just it's not just filled with queerness and transness, but it's also, filled with a lot of feminism. And I was thinking about that tradition, the loqueria, the loca. And also, I think that there was a moment where you say, you bring up one of the characters like mannerisms, and you describe these mannerisms as almost containing a form of hidden truth, right? And I was thinking about like, what exactly is that hidden truth, right, in the mannerism that these characters, perform, and how that's related to tradition. With tradition, I was also thinking chasm with Baudelaire. I love Baudelaire, and I found it hilarious, but also powerful that you said that in Bangla, right, is how you related or you enjoy Baudelaire's work. I was thinking, of course, with traditions, the sonnet form, since you brought that up, and also with Lucille Clifton. And then with Stephen, I was thinking, of course, of gay icons. You bring up Alanis, Tori Amos, Shirley Manson, and sort of in thinking about these women, I'm also thinking about not just the gay icon, but also thinking about the drag scene, right? And for how in the drag scene, the history of the drag scene is so much about these gay icons, right? These women. And I'm also thinking with Angie, you bring up this phrase in your first poem, the true communist, right? And to me, that was really interesting because I'm thinking not just about tradition, but there's something else that you are alluding to there. And I'm also thinking, of course, with you read a poem about death, a poem about love, and what are the traditions that you're working with. So I don't know who wants to start with this question of how do you see yourself engaging with queer and trans literary traditions, and are there particular ways you see yourself drawing on or deviating from these traditions? Anyone can start.
Okay, I'm going to begin. How about that?
Yes.
So you brought up this question of language, Baudelaire as an imperial writer from another tradition, coming in and being invoked or recited in the language of the colonized place. France didn't colonize in Bengal, but they colonized in India. And so French was spoken as a colonial language in India for many years and is spoken by many people of South Asian descent as a colonial language in the Caribbean and in Mauritius, in Indian Ocean island nation. So French is a colonial language in India also. And so there is something about the transformation of our adoption of those literary traditions to be a South Asian writer, to be a Muslim writer writing in the form of the sonnet, and the sonnet as, although in Italian in origin, truly, I think, people can argue with, if you want to argue about it, we can, but truly brought into contemporary poetry through its iteration in English. And for many years kind of held up as a benchmark of superiority or sophistication, and that if you were able to master that form to be taken seriously. So as a contemporary American writer, there is a tradition of undoing the sonnet, whether that's Ted Berrigan, who I mentioned, who was doing it in the 60s, or if it's Terrence Hayes or Harmony Holiday or Nick Dembski or Ben Lerner or any number of writers in contemporary American letters who are working in the form of the sonnet. So what are you doing new in the sonnet? And do you critique the colonial nature of the sonnet in a language? But it's also important to know that that track goes both ways. So you have the Vietnamese prose form that, famously recently that Ocean Vuong used in his novel On Earth We Are Briefly Gorgeous. But this is the prose form that Marguerite Duras wrote The Lover in, because Marguerite Duras is French national, but born in French, ethnically French, but born in Vietnam and raised in Vietnam until she was 18 and learned French in Vietnam. And so she adapted that form and brought it to France, and it became, through her, with no knowledge of that origin, became like a dominant form of the French novel in the back half of the 20th century, basically. And she, I don't know that she ever talked about this as the origin of that form, or not necessarily. But that's an example of, like, as Salman Rushdie says, the empire writes back. where you two come into the form, and you can queer the form, you can queer the institution. It is possible if you just join up, like what we saw with when every queer institution there was fighting for marriage equality, and as soon as marriage equality was achieved, all the funding for continued activism just dries up, because the people who had the money, that was the goal. If we were talking about universal healthcare is a queer issue, because health is a queer issue. But do you understand what I mean? So it's like there is a more conservative way to approach literary form as a writer that doesn't acknowledge the queer potential inside any, the concept of queerness is, to me anyways, like as Munoz and as other people have talked about, is like this, that what must be subverted. And so everything has to be queered, including queerness, I suppose.
I think something that you're helping me think about too is that there's this incredible book titled Black on Both Sides, and that it's a book about transness, right? And the author argues that in the question of Blackness, you have to start thinking about transness as well. And I think something that you're bringing up is a very powerful relation between the colonial, right, the colonized subject, and also the queer subject, that in a lot of ways, to talk about the colonized subject is to also bring in the question of queerness as well. So thank you so much for that. Others related to this question of tradition.
I can speak on that. So yeah, thank you for such a beautiful and excellent way of tying all of our work together. I've been thinking about tradition in terms of what was kind of like a central question in organizing this reading, which was the limitations of queer literature's focus on identity politics. And I think it's important to go back to tradition when we answer that question, because identity politics originated from the Combahee River Collective, which was a Black feminist organization in the 70s. And the term was first used as a descriptor for Black women working tirelessly to end the terms of their oppression after centuries of bondage, and that nobody is more worthy of liberation. And so I think that thinking now of the contemporary kind of subsumption or co-optation of the term elucidates for me like these transmutations and infinities of capitalism, and how this universal equivalence expands to take shape until nothing can slip through besides like money and light. And corporations like Amazon always have the capacity to post these rainbow banners while developing surveillance tools for the Department of Homeland Security. And so that's, I think it's important to remember our roots as we are faced with these like, these like autonomous and enormous blockades. And I think it leads us to imagine like, what is precisely the project of abolition? And I think of it as like the end of security and the beginning of safety, especially for Black trans women who have been on the front lines, not only in death, but in dreaming. And abolition to me as like this horizon of possibility that we work in the tradition of. And we learn from these like third world feminist Marxists who lit the path before us that all capitalism is racial and gendered capitalism historically and forever. And I think that we're writing now in an exceptional and heavy time, but it gives me hope that we're finally ready to go towards a place that's been like prepared for us by Black Panthers, Stonewall, Combahee River Collective, and many others, towards this anti-racist, queer, abolitionist future, which I believe that we still must strive to be worthy.
Others, I can respond to that, or yeah.
I know I really want to answer that too, which is like that intimate connection between the practice of queerness and um, uh, the reality of political structures during capitalism, which is, you know, what we are in right now, and probably will be for a while. I mean, to be practical about it all. But and what I said about what that the what exists must be constantly queered, in a sense, also can apply to politics in terms of, you know, what our practical resources are in electoral politics is the structure that exists. And to choose to undo the structure means, well, it can mean a couple of things. It could mean going local and creating collectives and, uncoupling from the structure, or like creating a commune out in the woods somewhere off the grid. I mean, there are ways of doing it, and people have done it and are doing it. But if you're working within the reality that you have, like what Malcolm X was talking about back in the day when he said the ballot or the bullet, he was not necessarily solely advocating armed resistance, but he was saying, like, we have two options. We either do that or we have to control the ballot. And this was like a main issue. And so what we talk about in terms of putting up these candidates like AOC or whoever it is, but the idea is that you always have to keep queering it. So when Barack Obama was elected in 2008, there were plenty of people on the progressive left side of things, including people in union leadership, who were saying, like, we should immediately build a left flank in order to then now press him from the left side. And at that time, the strategic decision was made. A lot of people were in those rooms, like, Democratic Socialists, everybody. They thought, okay, rather than build the left flank and potentially hamstring him, we won't do that, and we'll see how it all goes. So now we can see 12 years later, that was a mistake. It should have been done that way. And so now AOC is getting elected, and several other people, at least in New York, who are of that political stripe, won their nominations in the Democratic Party in Democratic districts. So in the fall, like, the squad will potentially be a much bigger squad. It won't just be the group of people. But does there still need to be a progressive movement built from the left? Because the US Congress is the US Congress. So you go in there, you get some people in there, but you have to, so there's always going to be the queer to the normative. It can't ever be achieved. It always has to be an act and process.
I also want to add that I think that, so when I was invited to this conversation, I thought, oh my God, I have to speak about contemporary queer literature. And I found that I do not read as much contemporary queer literature being published like today. And that's because I spend a lot of time reading and researching the people that I was not educated about. I read Randall Keenan's first novel 2 months ago, and that novel was published in 1989. This is a Black Southern writer writing about queer Black experience in the Carolinas, right? I read June Jordan when I was 23, 24, and when I read, and every time that I find these revolutionary, amazing Black queer writers, which is the tradition that I'm writing in, I sort of asked myself, how did I go my entire life without reading these people? And so I think, when you ask the question about how am I working, or thinking through what tradition I'm working in, a lot of my time writing is, and becoming a reader and establishing myself as a writer is educating myself and trying to create a tradition that I have not been educated in. And so I think that there is something to be said about creating structures and institutions that establish specifically Black literary traditions for Black queer and trans writers that are writing today, because half of my work as a reader right now in the world is trying to create that for myself, because those structures do not exist yet.
One thing that you're helping me think about too, Alejandro, is something that is happening in the academy, which is a question that has come up, and we're going to address that. But it's queering the syllabus, right? Or you know, like bringing feminism into the syllabus or looking at the syllabus through Blackness. There's a lot of that that has to go into the just pedagogical practices in general. Stephen, did you want to add something to that?
You were connecting the different like female pop singers to like a drag tradition. Oh yeah, I think that's interesting. I think for my character, having these feminine influences, it's a kind of making do, a kind of survival from, you know, piecing together what makes sense, what the you know, LGBT youth find, you know, truth in popular culture. I think my character was, you know, trying so hard not to be feminine, and yet these feminine influences keep the character moving in life. Yeah. I don't know. As I'm promoting this book, I'm thinking about how I can't get my Ricochet book into Barnes & Noble, which was the only bookstore I knew. And the LGBT section was woefully dreadful. I don't know how it is now. But that was what I had at the time. Yeah, so I had Tori Amos.
Back in the day, for me, it was Walden Books. Borders also was another bookstore connected to what you're talking about. And there's been a lot of, especially seeing in the last couple of years, the disappearance of a lot of independent bookstores, the argument that keeping Barnes & Noble alive, especially in a lot of rural environment areas in the United States, that's how, you know, queer people get erotica, right? That's how like queer people get, you know, I remember being a young kid and like, you know, a teenager and reading like erotica, like in the middle of all of this, and no one cared because no one was reading there. And like the bookstore was like pretty empty. Either it was like all the kids in the kids section with their moms or me reading erotica. And I'm just like, yay, you know, like, and in that, as you pointed out, you end up the making do is a thing that happens. I think that connects to one of my next questions, which the question is, in what ways do you see queer and trans literature resisting commodification, conformity, and homonormativity? And in thinking about that, not only am I thinking about the form of your book, Stephen, technology, looking at the internet as perhaps a utopia / dystopia / you know, a becoming of something that I think Angie, in the second poem you wrote, you read, Angie, you were talking about a toward, right? A thing that hasn't yet happened. And I was thinking about that too in relation to Kazim's poem, where I think in one of your poems, Kazim, you bring up the shape, and then you call it at some point like, is the shape God? Right? The shape is something that is still taking, you know, the shape is still taking shape. And so I'm thinking about this question of, how do you see maybe your work, or how do you see yourself working in this sort of traditions of resisting commodification, conformity, and homonormativity?
I think that's a really amazing question. You know, Carol Maso, who is a wonderful novelist who teaches at Brown University, talked about queer form in a way in prose in the novel. Should the novel be structured the way any social realist novel is? She said, should my desire sound the same as John Cheever's desire? You know, John Cheever, like old school, I don't know what, New Yorker style fiction writer. And she advocated for a more lyrical prose, you know, lusher, stranger, weirder. And she's one of the experimental, the tradition of experimental fiction that kind of came out of the 70s and onward. still kind of resisted, or maybe as one of its hallmarks, turned away from sentiment and sexuality of any kind in a way, you know. And her books, Carol Mesa's books, if you read them, I mean, they're sexy, they're messy, they're you know, gorgeous disasters, you know, and they just kind of, you know, fall apart in a way. And so I think about the transgressive possibilities of, you know, those kinds of books where the form itself is queer. I wrote this memoir about 13 or 14 years ago that was published in 2009 called Bright Felon. And it was written in single sentences, and it was written in chapters that were single sentences, and they were complete non sequiturs. And I did write it as a memoir, as a queer memoir, but nobody would publish it as a memoir, including there's a series of LGBTQ memoir that was done, at least, I don't know if it's still happening, but it was done at the University of Wisconsin Press used to do it, or still does it. And I even sent it there. And I explained in the cover letter, like, this is a prose memoir, it's discursive, it talks about my life, this is not poetry. But universally people said, like, it's too, you know, it's not interesting to us because it does not read like what a memoir is supposed to look like or sound like. So eventually Wesleyan University Press published it as a book of poetry. And that's what it's called, and that's how it's read, and that's who read it, people who were interested in poetry. That's who reviewed it. That's how it was reviewed. And so the problem with that is it brings up, at the time I said, and I still believe it's true, that the question of literary genre, the way we sometimes think about it, especially when we're talking about innovative or experimental writing, the problems with genre are the same as the problems with gender. And like gender, genre sometimes is primarily a reading practice where you are deciding to assign, based on what you imagine in your mind, you know, what that text is supposed to be. And sometimes the justifications for creating these genres are, it's purely a cosmetic. In my case, it's what did the prose, because it was prose, what did the prose look like? And it looked like a poem, so it was going to be called that, and it was going to be treated like that, which might not be how the text itself ought to have been enacted in the world, or how it saw itself. And so if I can just quickly relate this to a question that came up in the Q&A that Chris Campagnoni asked. He said, to what extent does the queer aesthetics operate within and without the institution, especially academia, as a working in and on/against, also working near other discourses like feminism, hybridity, non-white avant-garde, decolonialism, etc. So the issue with the academy, we were talking about decolonizing the syllabus, but in some cases we need to be talking about, and there was just a great piece that came on, I think on Medium or something like that, but we need to be talking about decolonizing the actual discipline. So what is the discipline of literary studies actually for? What was its function classically? And we probably, you know, that at least the discipline of English literature, literary study, manifested in India, and it was part of the colonial enterprise to promote the empire. And so the notion of teaching Shakespeare in school was not happening in England. It was happening in the colonies, because the canon was created, that canon was created in order to, Alejandro Ali and other people have written about this. So when we talk about decolonizing literature, should literature be taught in the institution of higher education as an English department? Should it be a world literature department? Should comparative literature, even comparative literature as a discipline, has its own problem because it's still got in the comparative side. So at UCSD, where I teach, of course, going to be the best, the comparative literature people, the English department, the creative writers, the theory people, the cultural studies people, it's all one giant department. It's called literature, and we all have these different strands and these different approaches. So how do you decolonize sociology? How do you decolonize creative writing? Not just shifting the syllabus, but rethinking what it is that we're actually doing. And to go to what Chris actually mentioned, one piece that we have to think about is what is the relationship between academic study, critical inquiry, and creative work, And those people that meld or blend or do multiple things, sometimes in the same book itself, like Muriel's new book, beautiful book, forthcoming from Night Poet Books, which has multiple modes of approach. Or Mina Alexander, who I know Chris worked with at CUNY, who is a perfect example of a writer who did critical writing, she did poetry, she did memoir, she did novel, and a lot of times all of these modes happened in the same book. And because they happen in the same book, this goes back to the point that I said about Bright Felon, a reading public or a reviewing public didn't know how to handle this work. Like they didn't know how to read this work and talk about this work because we're still so gendered and genred in terms of the way that we look at and engage the literature that we're reading.
That's such a beautiful response, Kazim. And I'm thinking even in science fiction, right? That's still an issue. The fact that we are imagining new worlds and still we're thinking in these binaries. Would other people like to also add to what Kazim has said about this conformity, resistance?
Yeah, I wanted to say something quickly about the Academy, which is something that I am absolutely so done with these days. I'm like, it's 2020, I'm ready to cancel it. So I am a PhD student at UC Santa Cruz, and I'm one of the 81 students who was fired for organizing a graduate student teaching strike. This spring, we were asking for living wages. I think probably everyone in California has heard of this, but it left me without work, student status, or health insurance in the beginning of this pandemic. And the UC told us they had no money to pay graduate students more, and they spent about $300K a day on military grade surveillance technology at the picket line. And each of the cops who were dressed in riot gear who arrested and brutalized 18 of my friends were paid overtime, averaging about $250K. Additionally to that, they issued these multi-year suspensions to my friends for their participation in the strike, and they're trying to disappear us completely from the institution via these academic disciplinary measures. And they racially targeted students who are Black, Brown, Indigenous, and as well as queer, trans students, and especially undocumented students in the student misconduct proceedings. And so at a school in which this idea of decolonizing the syllabus is pretty prevalent. Like our literature department has pretty radical leftist Marxist leanings, and yet not supporting us in these very material ways and disappearing us from these institutions is like a form of violence as well. Yeah, including our names on a syllabus is just simply not enough. So thank you for saying all the things you said, Kazim. It's really important.
I also want to just say to you, Angie, since we're all here, I mean, I guess in public, but that I'm in solidarity with the graduate students, my graduate students at UCSD, and with the students at Santa Cruz, and with the UC graduate students, and many, many faculty members. We're also, I mean, we too are organizing from our side on your behalf. So I know it's been really horrible how this is all shaken down, but you are not forgotten, and it's going to be a long road probably, but I'm with you.
Thank you. Alejandro or Stephen, would you like to add to this, to resistance? There's a lot of beautiful things that have been said.
I have so many. I've been thinking a lot about our investment in political identity as an ideology. I've been thinking a lot about it because I was in a conversation with Alja Monet a few weeks ago, and she brought up a very important point that in this when we talk about political identities, we always talk about 70s, 80s, and 90s, and how Black queer women especially were organizing working around this ideology. And Aja just reminded me that during that time, not everyone was in agreement about how to mobilize and how to create community. She brought up specifically how June Jordan was very adamant about not creating a community only on the basis of political identity. So she is very famously known for asking, when we get the monsters off our backs, we all may want to run in very different directions. And so we need to be able to create community and understanding on the basis of ideas and visions for the future, etc. I bring this up just because I've been trying to clarify for myself the role of political identities and how I relate to that work in my own work. And I think part of that, doing that work, has been identifying the ideology of political identities as a form of empowerment as an ideology, right? It is an ideology just like other ideologies, which means that just as it's useful to us, just as it's important for me to come into this space and tell you that I'm a queer Afro-Dominican person, that I'm from the Bronx, that these are all of my identities, it is equally as important to understand that ideologies have their limits. And that political identities, centering political identities in our art is sometimes complicated, especially right now, which, as you've brought up, a lot of our identities are being commodified. A lot of industries and institutions want us to be the face of their institutions, but only want us a very specific way. And so when I go to Strand here in New York or to another local bookshop, when I look through the books that people of color are publishing, it's all about trauma. It's all about people explaining the history of their country. It's all about people telling you why I'm so fucking angry that I'm being killed for being a faggot, right? Like, but nobody wants to hear, for example, and I'm not trying to say that we need to just focus on joy and all of these things, but I do think there's something to be said about, the white Russian woman that gets to make millions of dollars from writing books about white love stories, and we are here still talking and explaining ourselves to white people, or explaining sometimes ourselves to each other also, but that feels limiting to me. In my own work, I obviously deal a lot with queerness and race and all of these things that are integral to our lived experiences. But I try to tell myself that thinking through queerness and thinking through racial politics and thinking through identity politics is often an entryway into my work. So when I'm writing a coming of age story about two queer kids that are trying to understand themselves or trying to find themselves in their queerness, right? I'm also thinking about interiority. I'm also thinking about friendship. I'm also thinking of all of these things. And I'm trying to find ways in my own work and in my own spaces to push the conversation so that we are not forgetting that political identity and constructing our work around this ideology is an ideology, and it is limited. So.
Thank you for that, Alejandro. There's so much to say about ideology, obviously, and maybe we can tie it to, I know that we answer in the Q&A Chris's question. Adam writes a question here. Thinking about the female pop stars inspiring Steven's character and the quote unquote traditional femininity that the cross-dressing boys in Alejandro's story aim to embody, how do traditionally feminine aesthetics become queer when they are placed in the hands of male-assigned people? Is feminine glamour inherently queer in a patriarchal society? Loaded questions, I love these. I think we all have access to the Q&A, right? The questions here, so.
Yeah, I feel like that question has my name, but I'm gonna take a step back and allow other people to step in. Yeah.
I guess I can say something on that. In the book How to Be Gay by David Halperin, he talks about, there's a chapter about gay femininity, and he talks about like gay femininity is its own kind of femininity. It's femininity simply because it's read as like not male. So it's othered, and I think that's why non-straight men find truth in in the traditional femininity, even if it's in a different way than other femininities.
I'm also thinking too about the question, the way that this question is phrased by Adam, the traditionally feminine aesthetics, like the male assigned person, right, performing queerness. And I'm thinking that being involved in a lot of queer spaces in the drag scene, you had a lot of butch women also performing drags of women, right? So the fact that, you know, to me at least, this showed that, you know, even different categories of queerness or different queer identities were taking something like the you know, the Diana Ross look, right? And we're queering that, so it didn't even matter if it was male assigned or not. Alejandro, maybe you can say something.
Yeah, I mean, I'm having a hard time coming up with us. I think yes, sometimes, but I do think that that is a very singular sorry, there's somebody playing, I think, Bad Bunny outside of my window. I think that what is queer, as Kazim was saying earlier, is just what is subversive. And in that story specifically, I was trying to identify some of the things that I had seen in my own life, specifically around people identifying queerness. In my own culture, El Maricón is identified not necessarily primarily by who he specifically fucks, but usually by mannerisms, usually by what they wear or how they speak. And it's usually through gender performance. And so that's part of what I was trying to do, before getting to the conversation of queerness around sex and love is love and all of these things. I was just trying to explore the ways in which people who believe themselves to be boys and men are exploring gender and subverting gender by just being in the world. And then all of these things are assigned to them, like traditionally feminine, like everything else that we say about, you know, the gender binary. So
I also think too that this question, that feminine glamour inherently queer in society, it made me think a lot of Paris is Burning, the documentary, right? When some of the trans women are being interviewed, and there's like this montage, right? Like going between a Black trans woman, and then these pictures or these scenes of women, white women specifically, right? Like in these fashion shows, or white women just sort of being free in New York City, expressing themselves. And I think that the question of whether or not feminine glamour is inherently queer, what I remember those women, Black trans women, talking about is that there's this need for accessibility, and there's this need for being comfortable in the world, right? That it isn't so much about, yeah, you can talk about performing in the world, but being comfortable in your own skin, that when you see these magazines, when you see these women out in the streets, they feel so comfortable wearing skirts, dresses, high heel shoes, etc. And so that's how I feel I can connect this question to that documentary. I don't know if anyone has any final thoughts.
I would love to add something just quickly. I think a little bit about the kind of mainstreaming of drag. I mean, I know RuPaul isn't the only interesting person in the world, but there is a way that drag, or a certain kind of drag, has become mainstreamed in ways that are transformative and positive. Like, I mean, my 12-year-old niece has a favorite drag queen, so that's weird and interesting. But it also has a certain, is there a certain way that the mainstream heteronormative culture wants to assimilate or commodify transness and drag performance as a way of yet undermining a more gender fluidity or queerness or non-binary expression of gender? So that's interesting to me. And then I think about like some of the more transgressive forms of drag, like maybe what Kevin Aviance does, or phonique for Bay Area people who might know phonique. Like there's different ways of undercutting this that I feel in terms of the literary text, it might be interesting to think about the French genre of l'écriture féminine, which was like quote unquote feminine writing, but was like actually what we might think of as queer writing. Because this was like, these were novels that sort of like turned their back on the question of closure, or they turned their back on like traditional structures in fiction, like what Stephen is doing, you know? And so that kind of writing could be seen as a queer writing. So in that sense, when you say feminine glamour, you don't necessarily mean like the type of femininity that has been encoded in like general patriarchal expression, but a kind that is queer in and of itself. You know, it's like that old chestnut about like the Dynasty, that old soap opera from the 80s, which I watched because I was alive and conscious in the 80s, unlike probably many of you on this call. But like the joke was that like every women character on Dynasty was actually a drag queen, that they were behaving or like queering the gender in a certain way, you know? And so we can find the canon of queer literature, it actually exists already. Like The Sun Also Rises by Ernest Hemingway is like a queer text actually, like the queerness is inside it already. And so that idea of like reading queer, who is it who said it? I don't remember. Someone smarter than me will tell us that queer history is in the gaps, that you read the spaces, and that's where queer history is found, in the silences. And so we have everything we need to move forward. But if all we are doing is reinscribing the old forms and the old hierarchies of structure in fiction and in literary life, then we're not going to get where we want to go.
Thank you so much for that. And I guess we're going to close tonight's reading with Tisha.
Thank you. This was beautiful, everyone. Wow. I want to thank all of our attendees for joining us at this first event of our 2x2 reading series, Queer Aesthetics, Looking Forward. Thank you, Roy, for leading us this evening. You were an amazing moderator and facilitator. Thank you, Kazim, Alejandro, Stephen, Angie, for reading and for being part of the Goldline and Ricochet community. We also want to thank our sponsor, One Archives at the USC Libraries, for their support in putting together this event. Since this is our first reading as part of this series, we'd like to pause a moment. You guys put on your best faces, your best, hold on, I got to adjust myself, to take a screenshot of all of us for our memories. And I don't remember who's taking the picture, but we're going to have a screenshot.
I believe Sarah's taking a picture.
You done, Sarah? Good. Okay. Thank you, Sarah. I was looking at trying to figure out where it was without looking too weird in the face, because Laura accused me of making weird faces. So this 2x2 reading series will be held once a month. and it will feature authors in the Goldline and Ricochet catalog. I've pasted in the chat so you can follow us on Instagram, on Twitter, and or on Facebook to join us for our next event and to see updates on our calls for submission. Ricochet Editions is currently open to hybrid manuscripts until July 20th, and the link is in the chat for those of you who are interested, or if you know a writer who is interested and has a hybrid manuscript they might want to submit for consideration. Goldline fiction, nonfiction, and poetry chapbook contests will open on July 15th. So save that link, and if you go back on July 15th, you can see the information for submitting to Goldline Press. I want to thank everyone and wish you a wonderful evening. Be safe, be well. Thank you. Muriel was afraid to leave.
That was great, guys. I feel like I knew Tisha was gonna stay till the end. I was like, let me just wait so I can so I can talk to her.
That was so great.
That was really awesome.
We stop recording now?